They didn't just steal the spotlight, they manipulated the men around them like puppets, controlling their careers, relationships, and even their lives. With cunning strategies and unrelenting charm, they played the game with no rules, making powerful men dance to their every whim. Greta Garbo. You know that one person who never chases anyone, yet somehow everyone chases them? That was Greta Garbo. She had this untouchable, mysterious vibe that made people absolutely obsessed with her. And the crazy part? She didn't even seem to care. Garbo wasn't like other Hollywood actresses of her time. While most were out there playing the fame game, giving interviews, doing publicity stunts, soaking up the spotlight, Garbo wanted none of it. She avoided Hollywood parties, refused to give interviews, and didn't even bother showing up to the Academy Awards when she was nominated. Yet that made people want her even more. Men didn't just fall for Garbo, they practically worshipped her. Directors, actors, even royalty, they all wanted a piece of her, but she never let anyone truly have her. She had passionate affairs with some of the biggest names of the time, including John Gilbert, her co-star, and one of Hollywood's top leading men. Gilbert was madly in love with her. He proposed multiple times, and she always found a way to dodge it. One time, she actually agreed to marry him, but then just didn't show up to the wedding. Gilbert was humiliated, heartbroken, and still, he kept coming back for more. That's how deep Garbo's hold on him was. Garbo had this incredibly intense stare, almost like she was looking straight into your soul. On screen, she played mysterious, distant women, and off-screen, she was exactly the same. But the thing is, it wasn't an act. She just was that way. She hated small talk, wasn't interested in Hollywood drama, and preferred her own company over being in the spotlight. And that made her even more fascinating. The less she gave, the more people wanted her. She had this air of secrecy, and in a town where everyone wanted to be seen and talked about, she made them beg for her attention instead. Garbo didn't just have men wrapped around her finger, women were just as obsessed with her. She had relationships with some of the most glamorous women of her time, including Marlene Dietrich, Mercedes D'Acosta, and playwright Eva Le Gallienne. The thing about Garbo? She never confirmed or denied anything. She let the rumors swirl, and instead of explaining herself, she just vanished. At the height of her fame, she walked away from Hollywood at just 35 years old, never making another movie again. Just like that, she was gone. Most stars spend their entire lives chasing fame, but Garbo, she let fame chase her. She had the world in the palm of her hand, and instead of using it to build an empire, she dropped it and walked away. And that's exactly why she still fascinates people today. She was beautiful, talented, and completely unpredictable. She never gave people what they wanted, and that made them want her even more. Now that is power. Bebe Daniels. Bebe had a way of making men do exactly what she wanted. And the best part? They never even realized they were being played. She was a star from the silent film era, a time when Hollywood was still figuring itself out, and she knew how to work the system better than anyone. She wasn't just another pretty face. She was smart, ambitious, and knew how to make the right people fall under her spell. Men in Hollywood weren't used to women calling the shots, but Bebe didn't care. She had studio moguls, directors, even gangsters wrapped around her finger. If she wanted a role, she got it. If she wanted a favor, someone would pull strings. She knew exactly how to make men feel like they were in charge while she was the one actually running the show. She started acting as a kid, but by the time she was a young woman, she had already built a career most actresses could only dream of. Cecil B. DeMille, one of the most powerful directors of the time, was obsessed with her talent and charm. But Bebe wasn't the type to just sit around and be grateful. She wanted more, and she knew how to get it. She made sure she wasn't just seen as a silent film star. When talkies took over, she smoothly transitioned and refused to be forgotten like so many other silent-era actresses. The men in her life were powerful, and she made sure to always be in control. She had a connection with notorious gangster Ben "Bugsy" Siegel, who was known for running Hollywood's underground scene. If she needed protection, a favor, or someone out of her way, she had people willing to handle it. Studio executives and producers were no match for her charm, and she made sure her career never slowed down. But the most interesting thing about Bebe? She never let the drama catch up with her. While so many other actresses of her time got lost in scandal, she managed to stay on top. She had the brains, beauty, and boldness to outplay everyone. And by the time she retired, she had a legacy no one could touch. Dolores Del Rio. She wasn't just beautiful, she was hypnotic. The kind of woman who could walk into a room and make time stop. She had this elegant, almost otherworldly presence that left men completely enchanted. But no matter how much they adored her, she always stayed just out of reach. She was one of the first major Mexican stars in Hollywood, a time when the industry was dominated by American and European faces. But Dolores was different. She had a quiet, graceful power that made people desperate to be near her. Directors, actors, studio heads, they all fell under her spell, but she never let herself be owned by any of them. Orson Welles, one of the most brilliant filmmakers of all time, was obsessed with her. He called her the most exciting woman he had ever met, and it wasn't just talk, he was completely devoted to her. But even he, a man who controlled every detail of his films, couldn't control Dolores. Their love burned hot, but like all her romances, it was on her terms. Before Welles, she had been married to Cedric Gibbons, a powerful MGM art director. He was one of Hollywood's most influential men, yet in their marriage, Dolores was the one with the real power. Men didn't leave her, she left them. No matter how much they loved her, how much they tried to keep her close, she always remained untouchable. Unlike other Hollywood stars who clung to fame, Dolores didn't beg for attention. Attention found her. She carried herself like a queen, not in a loud or flashy way, but in a way that made people desperate to please her. Even after she left Hollywood and returned to Mexico, her legend only grew. She wasn't just another actress. She was an enigma, a woman who made men fall at her feet without ever having to ask. And the best part? She never let them believe they had won. Gloria Swanson. She knew exactly how to get what she wanted. Long before Sunset Boulevard made her an immortal Hollywood legend, she was already a force to be reckoned with, a silent film siren who had men falling over themselves to please her. She wasn't just a star, she was a queen, and every powerful man in her orbit knew it. One of her most famous conquests? Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father. A ruthless businessman and political mastermind, Kennedy wasn't the type to let a woman control him. Except, with Gloria, he was completely under her spell. He secretly funneled money into her career, helping fund her films while she held all the real power in their relationship. While he was trying to build his empire, she had him wrapped around her little finger, making him believe that helping her was his idea all along. And Kennedy was just one of many. Gloria had a string of lovers, from directors to studio heads to aristocrats. She married multiple times but never let any man own her. Even as Hollywood shifted and silent film stars started fading, she refused to disappear. Instead, she reinvented herself, proving time and time again that she didn't need a man to stay on top, though they definitely helped along the way. She had a presence that commanded attention. Men didn't just fall in love with her, they worshipped her, and like any great siren, she knew how to keep them hooked just long enough before slipping away, leaving them obsessed and powerless in her wake. Evelyn Keyes. Keyes was something else. She was the kind of woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and trust me, the men in her life were completely at her mercy, whether they realized it or not. Evelyn wasn't just stunning. She had a charm and wit that made men fall at her feet. John Huston, the famous director, was one of the first big names to fall for her, and their affair was the talk of Hollywood at the time. Huston, a guy who was already known for his charm and power, found himself wrapped around Evelyn's finger. But it wasn't just him. She was also famously involved with Artie Shaw, a legendary band leader, and honestly, it seems like these men just couldn't get enough of her. Shaw was completely smitten, and they even got married for a time. But Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who was about to be held down by any guy, no matter how charming or famous he was. She played the relationship game like a master, keeping Artie on edge, making him work for her affection, while still making sure she was always in control. But here's where it gets interesting. Evelyn didn't just have a string of men, she had a string of powerful, influential men in her corner, and she was great at keeping them in her orbit. Even after her marriages ended, she had other big names falling for her. She was rumored to have had affairs with a few directors and other Hollywood power players. She always kept things just close enough that they stayed invested, but never fully let anyone get too comfortable. It wasn't just about looks or charm. Evelyn had this ability to make men feel like they were the ones chasing her, while she kept her distance just enough to make them want more. No one really knew what she was thinking, and that's what drove them wild. She'd be this picture of elegance, and next thing you knew, they'd be completely obsessed, doing whatever it took to stay in her good graces. The crazy part? Even after all of this, Evelyn was never really talked about as the typical Hollywood heartbreaker, the way some of the other actresses were. But trust me, the men she had relationships with, whether it was John Huston, Artie Shaw, or others, were completely under her spell, and she had the power to keep it that way. She was one of the most fascinating women in old Hollywood, and honestly, she played the game better than most. Carole Lombard. Lombard was the ultimate charmer. Like, she could walk into a room, flash that killer smile, and suddenly everyone was hanging on her every word. She had this quick wit and energy that made her irresistible. But it wasn't just her looks, it was her personality that had men, even the most powerful of them, completely wrapped around her finger. She was always one step ahead in the game of love and desire. Now, let's talk about Clark Gable, because their relationship was something else. Gable was already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, the king of the silver screen, and the last guy you'd expect to fall hard for anyone. But Carole, she completely swept him off his feet. She had this way of making even the toughest, most self-assured men lose their minds over her. Their relationship wasn't just a fling, it was passionate and intense. Gable, who was known for being a bit of a heartbreaker himself, found himself completely out of his depth with Carole. She controlled the dynamics of their love story. She knew how to play with his emotions, keep him on his toes, and make sure he was always thinking about her, which made him fall even harder. It was clear that he was head over heels for her, but at the same time, she didn't let him get too comfortable. She kept him in a state of constant excitement and, frankly, in awe of her. Even after they got married, Carole still maintained that sense of control. Their relationship was full of spark and fire, and it was her charm and energy that made Gable change his life completely. He was never the same after meeting her. It's almost like she turned his world upside down with her confidence and humor, and he loved it. But what makes Carole stand out is that she knew exactly how to keep the upper hand. She was always the one leading, subtly pulling the strings, and making sure the men who adored her were completely under her spell, Clark Gable included. May Wong. May Wong was a true trailblazer, not just because she was one of the first Asian American stars in Hollywood, but because she had this captivating allure that was impossible to ignore. Despite the racial barriers she faced during an era where Hollywood was pretty much controlled by white actors and directors, Anna carved out a space for herself. But she wasn't just a groundbreaking star. She also had a way of getting what she wanted in both her career and love life. Hollywood men, including some of the most powerful and influential in the business, were completely mesmerized by her. She had a string of high-profile lovers, and trust me, she knew exactly how to keep them chasing after her. There was something magnetic about Anna. She didn't just have the classic beauty. She had this mysterious, almost untouchable quality that made her the kind of woman you couldn't just get enough of. Anna wasn't about playing the part of the passive, obedient woman, though. She was fiercely independent and knew her worth. If a man wanted her attention, they had to earn it. And even when they thought they had her figured out, she'd keep them on their toes. She was always a little bit elusive, never fully giving herself away, and that made men even more obsessed with her. She didn't have to settle for anything less than what she deserved. Anna wasn't afraid to demand what she wanted, whether that was in her career or relationships. And when she didn't get it, she'd move on. No problem. She had an air of confidence and mystique that kept men coming back, even when they had no idea where they stood with her. But here's the thing. May Wong wasn't just a passive beauty who got swept away by the men who adored her. She was a woman who knew exactly how to maneuver in a world that often tried to put her in a box. She was a star, a lover, and a woman who refused to let anyone control her narrative. She held the power in every relationship, knowing how to pull the strings while keeping men completely enchanted, and ultimately, always leaving them wanting more. Barbara Payton. Known for her stunning beauty, she had men falling head over heels, willing to do anything just to win her favor. But it wasn't just her looks that kept them coming back. It was her personality. She was bold, daring, and completely unpredictable. One moment she'd be charming them with her flirtatious wit, and the next she'd be pushing them away, leaving them hanging and desperate for more. Barbara had a knack for keeping men hooked, making them think they were the one who could finally tame her wild, unpredictable heart. But the truth was, she never let anyone get too close. She was always a little out of reach, always keeping them guessing. Her drama-filled love life meant there was never a dull moment, and those who got involved with her were often left tangled in her emotional web. She didn't care about the mess she left behind. Broken hearts? No problem. What mattered was that Barbara Payton always came out on top. The men who fell for her would always remember the way she made them feel, obsessed, entranced, and completely under her spell. And even though they might have been heartbroken in the end, they were left with no choice but to admire her, because Barbara knew exactly what she wanted, and she made sure she got it. Shelley Winters. Shelley Winters was one of those actresses who just demanded attention the moment she walked into a room. She had this larger-than-life presence that was impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just her looks. Though she was definitely a stunning woman, it was her personality that really got people hooked. She was bold, brash, and had a sharp tongue that could cut through the air like a knife. Shelley didn't play by the rules. She did things her way, and that was part of her charm. She knew how to manipulate the people around her, especially the men in her life. While a lot of actresses might have relied solely on their beauty to keep men interested, Shelley took it to another level. She wasn't afraid to challenge them, push their buttons, and keep them on their toes. Men would fall for her, sure, but they could never be sure where they stood with her. One moment she might be sweet and playful, and the next she could hit them with a sarcastic quip or a challenge that made them second-guess everything. She had this ability to make men completely obsessed, but at the same time, they never knew what they were going to get from her. Was she going to flirt, or was she going to turn ice cold? Shelley made sure they were always kept on edge, always wanting more, but never quite able to fully figure her out. And that's what made her so dangerous in relationships. She had them eating out of her hand, but she was always the one in control. Her fearless attitude made her a force to be reckoned with in Hollywood. She wasn't afraid to take risks, make bold choices, or speak her mind, and that made her both loved and feared. She didn't need to follow the Hollywood script of being the sweet, demure starlet. She was the opposite, and that was exactly what kept men falling for her, even if they knew they were in for a wild ride. Sheridan. She had that perfect mix of beauty, charm, and a fiery personality that made her absolutely irresistible. Men were drawn to her like moths to a flame. But it wasn't just her good looks. It was her energy, her spark that really kept them coming back for more. She had a way of making men feel like they were the only ones in the room, but always on edge. You never quite knew what she was thinking, and that made her even more alluring. Sheridan wasn't about to let anyone walk all over her, and her relationships were often intense and full of drama. Whether she was with a studio mogul, a co-star, or someone else in Hollywood, her love life was never boring. She had this ability to wrap men around her finger without them even realizing it. They were constantly chasing after her, always trying to win her over, even though she was always just a little bit out of their reach. She didn't play the role of the helpless woman waiting for a man to sweep her off her feet. Anne was the one doing the sweeping. And even though men were often mesmerized by her, they knew that she was always in control. She had a way of keeping them on their toes, constantly wanting more but never fully getting it. Anne's charm was her ability to dominate without ever seeming like she was trying too hard. She could turn on the feminine charm, then turn it off just as quickly, leaving the men around her wondering what had just happened. That kind of unpredictable, fiery nature kept men obsessed and coming back for more, always hoping they could be the one to finally tame the wild and free-spirited Anne Sheridan. But the truth was, no one could. She played the game like no one else won.